The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in April of 1878, and Helena Ashford knew, before she even opened it, that her life was about to change in ways she had spent years dreading. She stood in the parlor of her aunt's boarding house in St. Louis, Missouri, her fingers trembling as they traced the sealed edge of the paper. Her spine curved forward in that familiar defensive posture she had carried since childhood. The fall from the hayloft when she was 12 had left her with a twisted spine that curved her shoulders forward and to the left, making her appear perpetually hunched, as though she carried an invisible burden on her back. "Well, open it then," Aunt Beatrice said from her rocking chair, her knitting needles clicking with impatience. "Standing there staring at it will not change whatever news it contains." Helena broke the seal and read the words that confirmed her worst fears. The wedding was off. Martin Crawford of Tucumcari, New Mexico Territory, the man she had corresponded with for 8 months, the man who had sent for her to become his bride, no longer wished to marry her. His telegram was brief and cold. "Received photograph. Cannot proceed with marriage. Will send return fare." The photograph. Helena had finally sent an honest one 3 weeks ago, after months of sending carefully angled portraits that hid her condition. She had included a side profile that showed the full extent of her curved spine, unable to continue the deception when the date for her journey west had been set. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that their months of correspondence, their shared thoughts on literature and philosophy, their mutual understanding about the loneliness of frontier life, would matter more than her physical form. She had been wrong. "He has rejected me," Helena said quietly, folding the telegram and placing it in her pocket. "He saw my photograph and changed his mind." Aunt Beatrice stopped knitting, her lips pursing into a thin line. "That is unfortunate, but perhaps for the best. A man who would judge you so harshly is not worthy of you anyway." But Helena knew the truth that her aunt would not speak aloud. At 23 years old, with no prospects, no dowry, and a physical deformity that made her the subject of whispers and pitying glances, this had been her best chance at marriage, at having a life of her own. Martin Crawford had been a widower seeking a practical arrangement, someone to help run his dry goods store in a remote town. It should have been perfect for someone like her. She spent the rest of that day in a fog of grief and humiliation, helping her aunt with the boarding house chores, scrubbing floors that did not need scrubbing, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from dwelling on the future that stretched before her like an empty prairie. That evening, as she prepared supper for the boarders, another telegram arrived. This one was from Tucumcari as well, but the sender was different. Maxwell Reeves, it read, and the message was puzzling. "Heard of Crawford's disgrace. Need housekeeper for cattle ranch. Room and board plus wages. Respectable position. Will honor original travel arrangements if interested." Helena read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. A cattle rancher offering her a job as a housekeeper. It seemed too convenient, too strange. And yet, what did she have to lose? Staying in St. Louis meant a lifetime of dependence on her aunt's charity, of watching younger, prettier girls marry while she faded into the background of other people's lives. "I am going to accept," she told her aunt that night over supper. Beatrice nearly dropped her fork. "Accept what?" "Helena, surely you are not considering traveling alone to New Mexico Territory to work for a strange man. A strange man already rejected me today. At least this one is offering honest employment." Helena's voice was steadier than she felt. "I cannot stay here forever, Aunt Beatrice. You have been kind, but I need to make my own way. In a territory full of outlaws and Indians. Helena, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I am 23 years old with no prospects. This is an opportunity, perhaps the only one I will have." She straightened her shoulders as much as her crooked spine would allow, ignoring the familiar ache that came with the movement. "I am going." The journey west took 8 days by train, and every mile that passed, Helena felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had never traveled so far from home, had never been truly alone. The other passengers gave her curious glances, their eyes lingering on the way she sat, the way her body curved unnaturally. She kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching the landscape change from the green hills of Missouri to the flat plains of Kansas, and finally to the stark, beautiful desert of New Mexico territory. Tucumcari was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures scattered along a dusty main street. The train station was little more than a platform, and when she stepped down with her 2 small trunks, the heat hit her like a physical force. It was nothing like the humid warmth of Missouri. This was dry and intense, making her skin feel tight and her throat parched. "Miss Ashford." A deep voice spoke her name, and she turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. His hair was dark brown, streaked with lighter strands from the sun, and his eyes were a startling shade of blue-gray that reminded her of storm clouds. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that he removed as he approached. "I am Maxwell Reeves." Helena had prepared herself for many things, but not for this. She had expected someone older, perhaps weathered and rough. Maxwell Reeves looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her throat tighten unexpectedly. "Mr. Reeves," she managed, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." He shook her hand firmly but gently, his calloused palm warm against hers. His eyes took in her appearance with a single sweeping glance, and she braced herself for the reaction she always saw. The slight widening of eyes, the quick look away, the barely concealed pity or discomfort. But Maxwell's expression did not change. He simply nodded and reached for her trunks. "The wagon is just over here. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long but manageable," Helena said, falling into step beside him. She had to take quick, slightly uneven steps to keep up with his longer stride, her body swaying with the effort. "Your telegram was unexpected. Might I ask how you heard about my situation?" Maxwell loaded her trunks onto the back of a sturdy-looking wagon hitched to 2 horses. Martin Crawford made sure everyone in town knew why he was backing out of the arrangement. He was not discreet about his reasons. There was a hard edge to his voice that suggested disapproval. "I thought his behavior was disgraceful, and I happened to need help at the ranch. My previous housekeeper moved back east to live with her daughter." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand steady under her elbow. As they started down the dusty road leading out of town, Helena studied him from the corner of her eye. He had a strong profile, with a straight nose and a firm jaw shadowed with stubble. There was something solid and dependable about him, like the landscape itself. "I should be clear about my expectations," Maxwell said after they had ridden in silence for a few minutes. "The work is not easy. The ranch is remote, about 5 miles from town. I have a foreman, Jose Martinez, who lives in the bunkhouse with 4 ranch hands. You would be responsible for the main house, cooking, cleaning, laundry. I can pay you $15 a month in addition to room and board." "That is generous," Helena said, surprised. It was more than she could have hoped to earn in the city. "It is fair for the work involved. The house is not large, but keeping up with the needs of working men requires effort." He paused, glancing at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I want you to understand that this is a respectable position. You will have your own room with a lock on the door. My men are good workers, and they will treat you with respect or answer to me." There was something protective in his tone that made Helena's chest tighten. "I appreciate your directness, Mr. Reeves. Call me Maxwell or just Max. We do not stand on formality much out here. Then you should call me Helena." The landscape opened up before them, vast and empty in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. The sky seemed enormous, an endless expanse of blue broken only by a few wispy clouds. In the distance, mesas rose like ancient fortresses, their red rocks glowing in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. "What made you want to come west?" Maxwell asked after a while. Helena considered her answer carefully. "I wanted a fresh start, a place where I could be useful, where I could make my own way, running from something or toward something." "Is there a difference?" Maxwell's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "I suppose not. I came out here 7 years ago for much the same reasons. The city did not suit me. Too many people, too many expectations." He gestured at the open land around them. "Out here, a person's worth is measured by what they do, not who their family is or what they look like." Helena felt her chest constrict. Did he know he was offering her exactly what she needed to hear, or was it simply coincidence? She decided it did not matter. She would take the comfort where she could find it. The ranch, when it came into view, was more substantial than she had expected. The main house was a long, low adobe structure with a covered porch running along the front. Nearby stood a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals filled with horses, and various outbuildings. In the distance, she could see cattle dotting the landscape, dark shapes against the golden grass. "It is not fancy," Maxwell said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "But it is solid. Built it myself when I first bought the land." He helped her down from the wagon, and as her feet touched the ground, several men emerged from the barn. They were a rough-looking group, dusty and weathered, but they removed their hats politely as Maxwell introduced them. "This is Jose Martinez, my foreman," Maxwell said, indicating a stocky man with graying hair and kind eyes. "And these are the hands: Tom Miller, Jack Sullivan, Pete Henderson, and Sam White." The men nodded their greetings, their expressions carefully neutral. Helena was used to being observed, assessed, found wanting. She straightened her back as much as possible and met their eyes steadily. "Miss Ashford will be keeping house for us," Maxwell announced. "I expect you all to treat her with the respect due any lady. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," and "Yes, boss" followed, and the men dispersed back to their work. Jose lingered for a moment, a warm smile creasing his weathered face. "It will be good to have proper meals again, Miss Ashford. Max here burns everything he tries to cook." He winked at Maxwell, who shook his head with good-natured exasperation. "Get back to work, Jose." "Going." The foreman tipped his hat to Helena and ambled back toward the barn. Maxwell showed Helena inside the house. The main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace at one end and a solid wooden table that could seat 8. The kitchen area was well equipped with a cast iron stove, shelves stocked with basic supplies, and a water pump that Maxwell explained drew from a deep well. There were 2 bedrooms off the main room, a smaller one that would be hers and a larger one at the far end that was Maxwell's. "It is not much," Maxwell said, setting her trunks down in the small bedroom. It contained a simple bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "But the bed is comfortable and you will have privacy." "It is more than adequate," Helena said honestly. "Thank you." Maxwell nodded, seeming suddenly awkward. "I will let you get settled." Supper is usually around 6. Nothing fancy tonight, just whatever you can manage with what is in the pantry. He hesitated at the door. Helena, I want you to know that you are safe here. If anyone, and I mean anyone, makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. I will, she promised, touched by his concern. After he left, Helena sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. The room was quiet except for the sound of the wind outside and the distant lowing of cattle. She was here in New Mexico territory, about to start a new life. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 plain dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her books on the dresser. Her mother's silver brush, her only valuable possession, went on the washstand. Then she changed into her work dress and went to explore the kitchen. The pantry was well stocked with basics: flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, rice, and various canned goods. She found a haunch of venison in the cold cellar and decided on a simple stew with biscuits. Cooking was one thing she had always been good at, and she lost herself in the familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and mixing dough. Maxwell came in as the sun was setting, bringing with him the smell of horses and dust. He stopped short when he saw the table, which she had set with mismatched plates and utensils she had found in the cupboards. A pot of stew sat in the center, steam rising invitingly, and a basket of golden biscuits beside it. "You did not have to go to all this trouble," he said, but there was appreciation in his voice. "It is what you are paying me for," Helena replied, ladling stew into bowls. "Should I call the men? They eat in the bunkhouse usually. Jose cooks for them there. This," he gestured at the table, "is just for us, unless you would prefer I ate with them. No, this is fine." Helena sat down across from him, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt, sharing a meal alone with this man she barely knew. "I hope the stew is acceptable." "I did not have time to let it simmer as long as I would have liked." Maxwell took a bite and closed his eyes briefly. "This is the best meal I have had in 6 months. You have a real talent." Helena felt warmth spread through her chest at the simple praise. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Maxwell spoke again. "I should probably explain why I really sent that telegram," he said, not meeting her eyes. "It was not entirely about needing a housekeeper." Helena's hand stilled on her spoon. "Oh." "I was in the general store when Martin Crawford was showing his friends the photograph you sent. He was laughing about it, saying cruel things." Maxwell's jaw tightened at the memory. "I have never liked Crawford much. He is a small man who makes himself feel big by making others feel small. But what he said that day, the way he spoke about you, it made me angry. You were just a young woman looking for a chance at a decent life, and he was treating you like a joke." Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks, a mixture of humiliation and something else she could not quite name. "What did he say?" "Nothing worth repeating." Maxwell's eyes finally met hers and they were fierce. "I took the photograph from him, told him if I heard him speak about you again, we would have words. Then I sent you the telegram because I figured anyone brave enough to send an honest photograph to a man like Crawford was someone worth knowing." Helena stared at him, her heart pounding. "You have the photograph." "I do. I can give it back to you if you want, or I can burn it." "Whatever you prefer." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Maxwell was quiet for a long moment. "My sister had a clubfoot," he said finally. "She died when I was 15, pneumonia took her. But I remember how people treated her, the way they would stare or whisper. She was the kindest, smartest person I ever knew, but all they saw was her limp. I swore then that I would never judge a person by what their body looked like, only by what their heart was like." Tears stung Helena's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I am sorry about your sister." "Her name was Margaret. She would have liked you, I think." Maxwell returned to his stew, signaling that the heavy moment had passed. "So, do you think you can tolerate this rough life? The isolation, the heat, the dust." "I think I can manage," Helena said, her voice stronger than she felt. "After all, I have tolerated far worse things than dust and heat." Over the next few weeks, Helena settled into a routine at the ranch. She rose at dawn to start breakfast, spending her mornings cleaning and organizing the house, her afternoons preparing supper and doing laundry. The work was physically demanding, and there were nights when her back ached so badly she could barely straighten up. But there was satisfaction in it too, in seeing the house transform from a bachelor's rough dwelling into something more like a home. Maxwell was gone most days, working with the cattle or riding the fence lines. But in the evenings, they would share supper and conversation. He was an easy man to talk to, thoughtful and well-read despite his rough exterior. He had taught himself from books, he told her, during the long winters when ranch work slowed down. "What made you choose ranching?" Helena asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I like working with my hands, building something that lasts," Maxwell said. He was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease. "And I like the honesty of it. Cattle do not care about your family name or your position in society. They just care whether you treat them right and keep them fed and watered. You sound like you did not have a happy childhood." Maxwell's knife stilled for a moment. "My father had expectations. I did not meet them. We parted ways when I was 18, and I have not spoken to him since." "I am sorry." "Do not be. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Forced me to figure out who I was, not who he wanted me to be." He glanced at her, and there was understanding in his eyes. "I imagine you know something about other people's expectations." Helena pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the evening was warm. "I spent most of my life trying to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible. I thought if I could just be quiet enough, small enough, people would stop noticing my back and see me instead. But it does not work that way." "No, it does not," Maxwell agreed. "People see what they want to see unless you make them look closer. And how do you do that?" He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. "You stand tall, Helena. You stand tall and refuse to apologize for taking up space in the world." She laughed, a bitter sound. "That is easier said than done when your spine will not cooperate." "I did not mean physically." Maxwell set down his whittling and turned to face her fully. "You stand the straightest of anyone I have ever met where it matters. You came all the way out here alone, ready to start over. You work harder than any 3 men I know. You have not once complained or asked for special treatment. That is standing tall." Helena felt tears prick her eyes again. How did this man, whom she had known for less than a month, see her more clearly than people who had known her for years? "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, countless pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Helena thought about what Maxwell had said about standing tall. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had been standing tall all along. She had just been measuring herself against the wrong scale. As spring turned to summer, the ranch grew busier. It was time for branding, which meant long days of hard work for everyone. Helena found herself cooking for a dozen men instead of just Maxwell, preparing vast quantities of food to fuel the exhausting work. She made massive pots of beans and beef, biscuits by the dozen, apple pies with dried fruit soaked until it was plump and sweet. The men were respectful, as Maxwell had promised. They thanked her for every meal, complimented her cooking, and treated her like a lady despite the rough circumstances. Jose became a particular friend, often staying after meals to help her wash dishes and tell stories about his family in Mexico. "You have made Maxwell happy," Jose said one evening as they worked side by side in the kitchen. "I have known him for 5 years, and I have never seen him smile so much." Helena nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "I am just doing my job. You are doing more than that, and you know it." Jose gave her a knowing look. "He looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." "You are imagining things," Helena protested, but her heart was beating faster. "Am I?" Jose dried a pot and put it away. "Well, maybe. Or maybe you should open your eyes and see what is right in front of you." After he left, Helena stood at the sink, her hands in the cooling water, thinking about Maxwell. It was true that they had grown close. He sought out her company in the evenings, asked her opinion on ranch matters, brought her small gifts from town. A book he thought she might enjoy, a packet of seeds for a vegetable garden, a length of pretty fabric that would make a nice dress. But he had never indicated that he saw her as anything more than a valued employee, a friend perhaps. And why would he? She was crooked Helena, the rejected bride, the woman deemed too deformed for marriage by a man who was himself thoroughly unremarkable. Maxwell was handsome, successful, kind. He could have his pick of women if he wanted. He certainly did not need to settle for someone like her. But a small, treacherous voice in the back of her mind whispered that maybe, just maybe, Jose was right. Maybe the way Maxwell looked at her, the way he always seemed to be finding excuses to be near her, meant something more. One particularly hot afternoon in July, Helena was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard raised voices from the direction of the barn. She paused, a sheet half-pinned, and listened. One voice was Maxwell's, and he sounded angry. The other was unfamiliar, higher-pitched and wheedling. Concerned, Helena left the laundry and walked toward the barn. As she rounded the corner, she saw Maxwell facing off with a shorter man in a suit that was far too fine for ranch work. The stranger's back was to her, but she could see the tension in Maxwell's shoulders. "I am telling you, Reeves, this is a fair offer," the man was saying. "More than fair. You would be a fool to turn it down. And I am telling you, Crawford, that I am not interested in selling. Not to you, not to anyone." Helena's steps faltered. Crawford. This was Martin Crawford, the man who was supposed to be her husband, the man who had rejected her so cruelly. "You are being stubborn," Crawford said. "This land is worth more to me than it is to you. I can offer you twice what you paid for it." "The land is not for sale," Maxwell repeated, his voice hard. "Now get off my property." "You cannot hold onto this place forever," Crawford sneered. "Water rights in this territory are complicated. One bad season and you will be begging me to take it off your hands. I will take my chances. Now leave." Crawford finally seemed to realize he was not going to win this argument. He turned to go and froze when he saw Helena standing there. His eyes widened with recognition, and then his face twisted into something ugly. "Well, well," he said slowly. "If it is not my former bride-to-be, so the rumors are true, you took her in, Reeves. That is very charitable of you." "Miss Ashford is my housekeeper," Maxwell said, moving to stand slightly in front of Helena. "And you will speak to her with respect or not at all." "Respect," Crawford laughed. "For a woman so desperate she came all the way out here to marry a man she had never met. Tell me, Miss Ashford, did you warn Reeves about your condition, or did you try to trap him too?" Helena felt like she had been slapped. Her face burned, and her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. But she forced herself to meet Crawford's mocking gaze. "I sent you an honest photograph, Mr. Crawford, which is more honesty than you showed me. You spent 8 months pretending to be a gentleman only to reveal your true character in the end. I would say I dodged a bullet, but I suspect you are too much of a coward to actually fire one." Crawford's face turned purple. "You little—" He did not get to finish the sentence. Maxwell grabbed him by the collar and propelled him backward toward his horse. "I told you to leave," Maxwell growled. "If I see you on my land again, I will not be so polite." Crawford scrambled onto his horse, still sputtering with indignation. "You will regret this, Reeves. Both of you will regret this." He spurred his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Helena stood frozen, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and humiliation. Maxwell turned back to her, his face still dark with anger. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "I am fine," Helena said, but her voice shook. "I apologize. My presence here has caused you trouble." "You have caused me nothing but joy," Maxwell said firmly. "Crawford is the one causing trouble. He has been trying to buy this land for 2 years. He wants the water rights. Will he make things difficult for you? He will try." Maxwell's jaw was tight. "But I am not giving up my land, and I am certainly not letting him drive you away." "You belong here, Helena." The simple statement, said with such conviction, made Helena's throat tighten. "Thank you," she managed. They walked back to the house together, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the hot afternoon sun. At the door, Maxwell paused. "What Crawford said about you being desperate," he began. "He was wrong. You were brave. There is a difference." "Sometimes bravery and desperation look very similar," Helena said wryly. "Maybe. But I am glad you were both, because otherwise you would not be here." He went back to work, leaving Helena alone with her tumbling thoughts. She returned to her laundry, but her hands were clumsy, and she had to repin the same sheet 3 times. The encounter with Crawford had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. He had put into words the fear that still lurked in the back of her mind, that she was only here because she had nowhere else to go, that Maxwell's kindness was pity dressed up as employment. But Maxwell's anger on her behalf, the way he had defended her without hesitation, suggested something else. Something that made her heart beat faster and hope flicker to life in her chest like a candle in the darkness. That evening, as they ate supper, Maxwell was quieter than usual. He pushed food around his plate, his mind clearly elsewhere. "What are you thinking about?" Helena finally asked. "I am thinking about how much I want to ride into town and put my fist through Crawford's face," Maxwell said bluntly. Then he looked up at her, and his expression softened. "And I am thinking about how remarkable you are." "Remarkable?" Helena almost laughed. "Because I insulted a man who insulted me first. Because you have been dealt a difficult hand in life, and you have not let it make you bitter or small. You face everything with grace and courage. That is remarkable, Helena." She did not know what to say to that. They sat in silence for a long moment, the air between them charged with something unspoken. "Maxwell," Helena began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "Why did you really ask me to come here?" He set down his fork and met her eyes. "I told you I needed a housekeeper." "And is that all I am to you? A housekeeper?" The question hung in the air between them. Helena could hardly believe she had been brave enough to ask it. Maxwell stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "No," he said finally. "No, that is not all you are to me." Helena's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Then what am I?" Maxwell turned back to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. "I do not know how to say this without sounding like a fool. I know you have been here less than 3 months. I know you came here expecting to marry someone else and you ended up with a job instead. But Helena, from the moment I saw you step off that train, so determined and brave, I have not been able to stop thinking about you." He crossed back to the table but did not sit down. "Every morning I wake up looking forward to seeing you. Every evening I count the hours until I can come back to the house and talk to you. You have made this place feel like a home instead of just a house. You have made me laugh more in 3 months than I have in 3 years. And I know I have no right to say this, but I need you to know. You are not crooked to me, Helena. You stand perfectly tall. Tears were streaming down Helena's face now, and she made no effort to wipe them away. I thought you just felt sorry for me. Sorry for you, Maxwell shook his head. Helena, I am in awe of you. Your strength, your kindness, your resilience. The way you move through the world with your head held high despite everything you have faced, that is not something to pity. That is something to admire. Helena stood up from the table on trembling legs. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncertain. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I know your life has been complicated enough without me adding to it. I just could not keep it to myself anymore, especially not after today, seeing Crawford treat you that way. Maxwell, Helena said softly. She took a step toward him, then another, until she was standing close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. I feel the same way. His eyes widened. You do? I tried not to, she admitted. I told myself I was being foolish, that a man like you could never truly want a woman like me. But every day you prove me wrong. Every day you see me, truly see me in a way no one else ever has. And yes, I have feelings for you, strong ones. Maxwell reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were rough with calluses but infinitely gentle. May I kiss you? Yes, Helena breathed. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, soft and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. Helena had never been kissed before, had never thought anyone would want to kiss her, but this felt right in a way she could not articulate. She reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pulled her closer, careful of her back, always careful and considerate. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Maxwell rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure. You have been through enough without me rushing you into anything. I am sure, Helena said. Maxwell, I am more sure of this than I have been of anything in my life. Still, he said, smiling, let me court you. Let me show you how a man should treat the woman he loves. The woman you love. Helena's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Maxwell said simply. I love you, Helena Ashford. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing on that train platform, looking so scared and so brave at the same time. I love you too, Helena said, and saying the words out loud felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in shadow. I did not think I would ever get to say that to anyone. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began their nightly vigil. For the first time in her life, Helena felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, held by someone who saw all of her, the curves and the crooked places, and loved her not despite them but including them as part of the whole person she was. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Helena had imagined. Maxwell brought her wildflowers from the meadow, took her on slow rides around the ranch so she could see the land he loved, read poetry to her in the evenings after supper. He held her hand as they walked, kissed her goodnight with a sweetness that made her knees weak, and never once made her feel like her physical limitations were a burden. The men on the ranch noticed the change in their relationship, of course. Jose grinned knowingly every time he saw them together. The other hands were more discreet, but Helena caught them exchanging pleased glances. They seemed genuinely happy for Maxwell, which told her something about the kind of loyalty he had earned from them. In August, Maxwell took Helena to a dance in town. She protested at first, remembering too many dances in her past where she had stood against the wall, watching other girls twirl and laugh while she tried to be invisible. "I cannot dance," she told Maxwell. "My balance is not good enough." "Then we will not dance," Maxwell said. "We will just go and listen to the music and eat the food and show Crawford that he did not break either of us." But when they arrived at the town hall, which had been decorated with bunting and lanterns for the occasion, Maxwell led her onto the dance floor anyway. He held her close, taking all her weight, moving slowly so she could follow. Other couples swirled around them, but Helena barely noticed. She was focused on Maxwell's face, on the warmth of his hand at her waist, on the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "You are a wonderful dancer," he murmured in her ear. "You are doing all the work," Helena protested, but she was smiling. "Not true. You are doing the hard part." "What is the hard part?" "Trusting me to hold you up." Helena felt tears prick her eyes at the simple truth of it. She was trusting him in a way she had never trusted anyone. And he had not let her down, not once. She saw Martin Crawford across the room, standing with a group of men and glaring at them. Let him glare, she thought. Let him see what he had given up. She was not the same desperate woman who had stepped off the train 3 months ago. She was Helena Ashford, and she was loved. As summer faded into autumn, Maxwell began talking about the future in concrete terms. He wanted to expand the ranch, he said, maybe buy the adjacent property when old Tom Henderson decided to retire. He wanted to build a bigger house with more bedrooms. "For children," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Someday, if you want them." "I want them," Helena said. "But Maxwell, my back, I do not know if I can safely carry a child." "Then we will adopt," Maxwell said without hesitation. "Or we will not have children at all. Helena, I want a life with you. Everything else is just details we will figure out together." In October, on a crisp morning when the air smelled of wood smoke and dying grass, Maxwell asked Helena to marry him. They were out riding, something Helena had grown more confident doing with his patient instruction. He stopped on a rise that overlooked the entire ranch, dismounted, and helped her down. "I love this view," he said. "I come here whenever I need to think, and lately all I can think about is you." He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. The ring inside was simple, a gold band with a small turquoise stone. "Helena Ashford, you have changed my life in every way that matters. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and stood to kiss her, and Helena thought her heart might burst from sheer joy. She had come west expecting rejection and had found acceptance instead. She had expected to be a servant and had become someone's beloved. She had expected to spend her life alone and had found a partner who saw her as whole and perfect exactly as she was. They were married in November, in the same town hall where they had danced. It was a small ceremony, with just Jose and the ranch hands as witnesses, and the local minister officiating. Helena wore a new dress Maxwell had insisted on buying her, a deep blue that brought out the color in her eyes. Maxwell wore his best suit, and looked so handsome that Helena could hardly believe he was hers. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, Helena thought about the telegram that had arrived 8 months ago, the one that had destroyed her plans and devastated her hopes. At the time, it had felt like the end of everything. Now she understood it had been the beginning, the first step on a path that had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this wild, beautiful place where she had finally learned to stand tall. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet. Maxwell taking his time, making sure she was comfortable, whispering words of love and encouragement. Helena had been nervous, unsure if her body would cooperate, if the same spine that had caused her so much trouble would interfere with this too. But Maxwell was patient and creative, and they found ways that worked, ways that brought them both pleasure and even more closeness. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Helena said, "I did not think I would ever have this, a husband who loves me, a home, a real life." "You deserve all of it and more," Maxwell said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer." Helena Reeves. Helena Reeves. She tested the name silently, liking the way it sounded, the way it felt. She was not Helena Ashford anymore, the rejected bride, the crooked girl. She was Helena Reeves, wife of Maxwell Reeves, and she stood perfectly tall. The first years of their marriage were full and happy. Helena managed the house and started a large garden, growing vegetables that supplemented their meals and saved money. Maxwell expanded the ranch as he had planned, buying Tom Henderson's adjacent property and increasing their herd. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. In the spring of 1880, they traveled to St. Louis, so Helena could introduce Maxwell to her Aunt Beatrice. The older woman was initially skeptical of this rough-mannered rancher who had swept her niece away to the wilderness, but Maxwell won her over with his obvious devotion to Helena and his respectful, thoughtful manner. "You have done well for yourself," Beatrice told Helena privately. "He is a good man. I can see it in the way he looks at you." "He is the best man I have ever known," Helena agreed. That summer brought trouble in the form of a drought. The creeks ran low and water became precious. Martin Crawford, who had indeed been trying to monopolize water rights in the area, began making aggressive moves to buy up struggling ranches. He approached Maxwell again, offering even more money. "I told you that you would come begging," Crawford said smugly when he rode out to the ranch in August. "One more month without rain and your cattle will start dying." "Then they will die," Maxwell said coldly, "but I am still not selling to you. You are a fool, Reeves. And you are going to drag that crippled wife of yours down with you." Maxwell had Crawford off his horse and on the ground in seconds, his fist drawn back. "Do not ever speak about my wife that way." "Max, stop," Helena called from the porch. "He is not worth it." Maxwell shoved Crawford away from him. "Get off my land, and if I hear that you have spoken one more word about my wife, I will do more than just put you on the ground. I will make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of man you are." Crawford scrambled onto his horse and fled. Maxwell stood watching him go, his chest heaving with anger. When he finally turned back to the house, Helena was waiting for him. "Thank you for defending me," she said, "but please do not get yourself arrested on my account." "He deserves worse than a beating," Maxwell growled. But he let Helena lead him inside and calm him down. The drought did test them. They had to sell some cattle, and money got tight. But Maxwell had been conservative in his planning, and they had reserves to fall back on. And when the rains finally came in September, late but heavy, their relief was profound. Crawford's luck was not so good. He had overextended himself, buying too much land on credit, and when the drought hurt his cattle operations, his creditors came calling. By Christmas, he had declared bankruptcy and left the territory in disgrace. Maxwell bought his land at auction for a fraction of what Crawford had paid, securing the water rights that would protect their ranch for generations to come. "I should not be happy about another man's misfortune," Maxwell said, "but I cannot say I am sorry to see him go." "Neither am I," Helena admitted. "He was a bitter, cruel man. Perhaps this will teach him something, though I doubt it." In the spring of 1881, Jose came to them with news. His daughter in Santa Fe had given birth to twins, but she had died in childbirth. The baby's father had been killed in a mining accident 2 months before, leaving the infants orphaned. Hosea's wife was too old to care for 2 babies, and he was desperate. "I am going to have to leave the ranch," he told them sadly. "I have to go help with the children. My wife and I are the only family they have." Maxwell and Helena looked at each other, and an entire conversation passed between them in that single glance. "Bring them here," Helena said. "The babies, bring them here." "What?" Jose looked stunned. "Miss Helena, you cannot mean that. Twins are a handful and you have the ranch to run." "We have been talking about children," Maxwell said. "We want a family. If you are willing, Jose, we would like to adopt them, raise them as our own. You and your wife could stay in the bunkhouse, see them every day, still be their grandparents. They would have a family and a home." Hosea's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? Take on 2 babies that are not even your blood?" "Family is not about blood," Helena said firmly. "It is about love, and we have plenty of that to give." And so they became parents overnight to twin boys, just 3 months old. They named them James and John, after Maxwell's father and grandfather, a gesture of reconciliation since Maxwell had recently started corresponding with his estranged father again. The babies were tiny and demanding, crying at all hours, needing constant care and feeding. Helena and Maxwell stumbled through those first weeks exhausted and overwhelmed, learning as they went. But they also fell completely in love. James was the quieter twin, thoughtful and observant. John was louder, more demanding, always ready with a smile or a scream depending on his mood. They were perfect, and Helena could not imagine life without them. "Look at us," Maxwell said one night as they sat together, each holding a sleeping baby. "Parents. We are terrible at this," Helena said, but she was smiling. "John spit up on me 3 times today. James got his diaper off and made a mess all over the nursery," Maxwell countered. "I think we are evenly matched in incompetence." They laughed quietly, trying not to wake the babies. In that moment, Helena felt a completeness she had never known. This was her family. These were her people. This life, so different from anything she had imagined for herself, was hers. As the boys grew, Helena's fears about her physical limitations proved largely unfounded. She could not carry them both at once, but she could manage one at a time. She could not chase them when they started toddling, but Maxwell was fast enough for both of them. They adapted, found solutions, worked together. The boys never seemed to notice that their mother moved differently than other mothers. To them, she was just Mama, the person who kissed their scrapes, read them stories, and made the best cookies in New Mexico territory. In 1883, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified, remembering her fears about her ability to carry a child safely. The doctor in Santa Fe, whom they traveled to see, was cautiously optimistic. "Your spine curvature is significant," he said, "but it is not the worst I have seen. You will need to be careful and there may be complications." But women with similar conditions have successfully carried children to term. The pregnancy was difficult. Helena's back pain intensified as the baby grew, and there were days when she could barely move. Maxwell hired a woman from town to help with the house and the twins, insisting that Helena rest as much as possible. He worried constantly, hovering over her like an anxious mother hen until she finally snapped at him to give her some space. "I am sorry," he said, chastened. "I am just scared of losing you." "You are not going to lose me," Helena said firmly, though she was not entirely sure herself. "I am tougher than I look." In November, after a labor that lasted 18 hours and left Helena exhausted and sweat-soaked, their daughter was born. She was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and her father's blue-gray eyes. They named her Margaret Rose after Maxwell's sister and Helena's mother. "She is beautiful," Maxwell whispered, holding his daughter for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "You are amazing, Helena. You just did the most incredible thing." Helena, exhausted but triumphant, watched her husband cradle their daughter and felt a swell of pride. She had done it. Her body, the body she had spent so many years hating and being ashamed of, had created this perfect little person. It was a revelation, a healing of something deep inside her that she had not even realized was broken. The twins, now 2.5 years old, were fascinated by their baby sister. They would stand by her cradle for long periods, watching her sleep, occasionally trying to poke her until someone stopped them. Jose and his wife Martha, who had moved into a small house Maxwell built for them near the main house, were constantly around, doting grandparents who spoiled all 3 children outrageously. "We have made a good life here," Helena said to Maxwell one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over land that stretched as far as the eye could see. The twins were playing in the yard under Jose's watchful eye, and baby Margaret was asleep in her cradle beside them. "We have," Maxwell agreed. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles. "Do you ever think about that day when you stepped off the train? How different things could have been?" "Sometimes," Helena admitted. "If Martin Crawford had not rejected me, if you had not sent that telegram, I would be living a completely different life. Probably a miserable one, married to a man who resented me." "His loss was my gain," Maxwell said, "though I wish you had not had to go through that pain to get here." "I do not," Helena said, surprising herself with the honesty of it. "Every hard thing I went through made me who I am, and I like who I am now. I like the life we have built together." "So do I," Maxwell said softly. "So do I." Over the years that followed, their family and their ranch both continued to grow. They added a daughter, Catherine, in 1886, and another son, Thomas, in 1888. The house Maxwell had built proved too small, so they expanded it, adding rooms and a second story. The ranch prospered, and Maxwell became known throughout the territory as a fair employer and a skilled cattleman. The twins grew into strong, capable boys who worked alongside their father as soon as they were old enough. Margaret proved to have her mother's quick mind and her father's determination, and Catherine and Thomas were inseparable, always getting into trouble together. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful, and Helena loved every exhausting minute of it. In 1890, when James and John were 9 years old, Jose sat them down and told them the truth about their parentage, that Helena and Maxwell were not their biological parents. The boys listened quietly, then James said, "But you are still our mama and papa, right?" "Always," Helena said, her heart in her throat. "Always and forever." "Then it does not matter," John declared. "You are still our family." And that was that. The boys never treated the information as anything momentous, never seemed to feel any different about their parents or siblings. They were Reeves' children, all of them, and blood did not matter one bit. Helena's back continued to cause her pain as she aged, and there were days when she moved slowly and carefully, when Maxwell would insist she rest and let others handle the work. But she never complained, never let it stop her from being fully present in her life. She had learned long ago that strength was not about having a perfect body, but about having an unconquerable spirit. In 1895, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when Maxwell had proposed, they stood together on the same rise overlooking the ranch. They were both older now, Helena 40 years old and Maxwell 42. Their hair showing threads of gray and their faces marked by years of sun and wind. But when Maxwell looked at her, His eyes held the same love and admiration they had held 17 years before. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked, not for the first time. "Saddling yourself with a crooked wife, Helena Reeves," Maxwell said, turning her to face him. "How many times do I have to tell you? You stand perfectly tall to me. You always have. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I thank God every single day that Martin Crawford was fool enough to let you go." Helena smiled and leaned into her husband's embrace. Below them, their ranch spread out in the afternoon sun. She could see the big house, smoke rising from the chimney where supper was cooking. The barns and outbuildings, all well-maintained and prosperous. The cattle dotting the landscape, their herd now numbering in the thousands. In the yard, she could just make out their children playing, their laughter carrying on the wind. This was her life, built from the ashes of rejection and humiliation. She had been told she was not good enough, not straight enough, not worthy enough. And she had come west expecting nothing, hoping for very little, prepared to settle for whatever scraps she could find. Instead, she had found everything: love, family, purpose, home. She had found a man who saw past her crooked spine to the woman beneath, who had stood up for her when no one else would, who had given her not just his name but his whole heart. "I love you," she told Maxwell, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too," he replied, kissing her forehead. "My perfectly tall, perfectly wonderful wife." They stood there together as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink and purple. In the distance, a coyote called and somewhere a cow lowed for her calf. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and dust and home. Helena thought about the scared, desperate young woman who had stepped off the train in Tucumcari 17 years ago. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that rejection was sometimes the universe's way of redirecting you toward your true path, that she was worthy of love exactly as she was, crooked spine and all. But that woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had learned that standing tall had nothing to do with the angle of your spine and everything to do with the courage in your heart. As they walked back down the hill toward home, toward the noise and chaos and love of their large family, Helena felt nothing but gratitude. For Maxwell, who had seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. For her children, each one a miracle she had never expected to have. For this wild, beautiful land that had given her space to grow and bloom and become herself. For the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, out of determination and hard work and deep abiding love. She was Helena Reeves, wife and mother, rancher and homemaker. She had a crooked spine and a straight heart, and she stood perfectly tall, exactly as she was meant to be. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. James and John grew into fine young men, taking over more and more responsibility on the ranch. James proved to have a gift with horses, while John had inherited his grandfather Hosea's easy way with people and became the public face of the ranch business. Margaret went away to school in Santa Fe, determined to become a teacher, while Catherine showed signs of following in her father's footsteps as a rancher. Thomas, the baby, was still finding his way, but showed promise as a natural leader. In 1899, Jose passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75. The entire ranch mourned him, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the land he had loved. His wife Martha followed him 2 years later, and they laid her beside him. Helena grieved for them both, these people who had been family in every way that mattered. As the new century dawned, bringing with it the promise of change and modernity, Helena and Maxwell found themselves becoming the older generation. Their children were grown, or nearly so, building lives of their own. James married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and within a year, Helena was a grandmother. John announced his intention to study law, wanting to help protect ranchers' water rights so no one could do what Crawford had tried to do. Margaret came home from college with a teaching certificate and a young husband, setting up a school in town. Through it all, Maxwell and Helena remained each other's anchor and constant companion. They still sat on the porch every evening, weather permitting, talking about their day or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. Maxwell still brought Helena wildflowers sometimes, and she still made his favorite apple pie. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed goodnight, still told each other, "I love you," every single day. In the summer of 1905, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together everyone whose lives they had touched. The ranch house was full to bursting with children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors, ranch hands both past and present. As Helena looked around at all these people, all this love, she could hardly believe it was real. "Happy anniversary," Maxwell said, pulling her aside for a moment of relative quiet. 25 years with the most remarkable woman in the world." 25 years with my best friend," Helena replied. "Who would have thought that telegram would lead to this?" "I would have," Maxwell said. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were special. I knew you were going to change my life." "And you changed mine," Helena said. "You gave me everything I never thought I could have. You showed me that I was worthy of love." "You always were worthy, Helena. I just helped you see it." They kissed, and someone whistled, and their children groaned in mock embarrassment, and everyone laughed. The party went on late into the night, full of music and dancing and joy. Helena could not dance the way she once had, her back too stiff now and painful with age, but Maxwell held her anyway, swaying gently to the music, and it was perfect. As the last guests departed and their children settled down for the night in various corners of the now quiet house, Helena and Maxwell stepped out onto the porch one more time. The moon was full, casting everything in silver light, and the air smelled of summer sage and distant rain. "No regrets?" Maxwell asked, as he had asked 100 times before. "Not a single one," Helena answered, as she always did, and she meant it. Her life had not been easy. Her body had caused her pain and limitation. She had faced rejection and cruelty and hardship. But she had also found love and family and purpose. She had built a life worth living, full of meaning and connection and deep satisfaction. She was Helena Reeves, and she stood perfectly tall, not despite her crooked spine but including it as part of the whole of who she was. And she was exactly where she was meant to be, had always been meant to be, from the moment that first telegram arrived and changed the course of her life forever. As they stood there in the moonlight, Maxwell's arm around her shoulder and her head resting against his chest, Helena sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for unexpected blessings, for men who could see past surfaces to souls, for love that transformed and healed and made all things new. The ranch stretched out before them in the darkness, this land they had built together, this legacy they would leave their children and grandchildren. It was not just property or livestock or buildings. It was a testament to what two people could create when they chose love over fear, when they saw worth where others saw only flaws, when they stood together against everything life threw at them. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, as every tomorrow did. But tonight, Helena Reeves stood perfectly tall beside the man who had always seen her that way, and she was completely, perfectly, wholly happy. She was home. She was loved. She was enough. She had always been enough, and that in the end was the greatest gift of all.